Welcome to the Freak Show, fellow freaks.
I'm Matthew Brockmeyer.
And I'm Krista Carmen.
And this is
Murder Coaster.
Step right up, ladies and gentlemen, and behold, 5 bizarre tales of Russian madness, mayhem, butchery, murder, and cannibalism. Yes, a 5-ring circus of terror, presented for your auditory pleasures. So listen, if you dare, to our 5 acts of horrifying true crime from Russia with love.
Let's begin. Act 1. Victor and Olga. Our first tale from Mother Russia is one that is often argued about, some saying it's too wild to be true. Others saying there's tangible evidence that it may in fact be true, and others saying they simply felt it to be true in their hearts, believing in the poetic justice of the tale.
It is an absolutely crazy story that was first published on the Russian website Life in April 2009, then quickly picked up by the Moscow Times, which supplied quotes as well as links to actual police reports, though these links no longer work. But there are actual photographs of those involved, though the faces have been blurred.
The story was then picked up by England's Daily Mail, then by Gawker and the Irish Slate, and by 2011 the story had gone viral. And it's still making the rounds in true crime circles today, 14 years later.
Okay, why don't we just read the Daily Mail article verbatim? Because I don't think we can improve on this journalistic excellence. So from the Daily Mail, and like all the sources we've ever used on the show, there's a link in the show notes. Quote,
"A Russian man who tried to rob a hair salon ended up as the victim when the female shop owner overpowered him, tied him up naked, and then used him as a sex slave for 3 days. Viktor Jasinski, 32, admitted to police that he had gone to the salon in Meshchovsk, Russia, with the intention of robbing it. But the tables were turned dramatically when he found himself overcome by owner Olga Zhazek, 28, who happened to be a black belt in karate. She allegedly floored the would-be robber with a single kick. Then, in a scene reminiscent of Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, police say Zhazek dragged the semi-conscious Jasinski to a back room of the salon and tied him up with a hairdryer cable. She allegedly stripped him naked, and for the next 3 days used him as a sex slave to, quote, teach him a lesson, end quote, force-feeding him Viagra to keep the lesson going. The would-be robber was eventually released, with Zhazek saying he had learned his lesson. Jasinski went straight to the police and told them of his backroom ordeal, saying that he had been held hostage, handcuffed naked to a radiator, and fed nothing but Viagra. Both have now been arrested. When police arrived to question Zhazek, she said, quote, "What a bastard. Yes, we had sex a couple of times, but I bought him new jeans, gave him food, and even gave him 1,000 rubles when he left."
So, is the story true, or is it just clickbait?
Well, Forbes magazine contributor Kira Blakely investigated it, but in the end she was unable to either confirm or deny it, so it remains a mystery. But as she pointed out, a lot of people certainly, quote, want it to be true. And that may be all that matters.
Act 2. Dmitri and Natalia.
Our second Russian true crime tale is Verifiably true, though some claim certain elements are exaggerated and falsified. But these naysayers could have sinister reasons behind their denials.
In September of 2017, a worker on a road maintenance crew in Krasnodar discovered a cell phone. Opening it up and scrolling through the photographs, he was horrified to discover pictures of dismembered bodies, including a selfie of a man with a severed human hand in his mouth.
The road worker immediately reported his find to the police, who tracked the phone back to one Dmitry Bakshivi and his wife, Natalia.
Dmitry, who was 35 at the time, was an ex-con who'd served time for burglary and car theft, and was then employed as an apartment repairman and general worker. He was described as a strange loner with dark, shifty eyes.
His wife, Natalia, who was 42 at the time, 7 years older than him, had been previously married and had a child. Natalia was known as a notorious and violent drunk, who'd been fired from her job as a nurse and estranged from her ex-husband and son for her alcohol abuse.
When confronted with the photographs on the phone, the strange couple originally said, well, they just found the body on the side of the road in some bushes. So they decided to take some photographs with it for a laugh, like anybody would do when they discover a mutilated corpse on the side of the road, right? I can just hear Natalia in my head telling Dmitry,
"Look, Dmitry, over there in the bushes. Why, it's a mutilated body just laying there. Let's put parts of it in our mouth and take pictures."
It can happen. In the punk rock documentary Decline of the Western Civilization, one of my favorite movies, probably seen it 100 times easy. When Darby Crash from the Germs is making breakfast, this weird punker girl is talking about how they found a dead guy in her parents' backyard, and she and all her friends took pictures of themselves with the body. He was a house painter who had had a heart attack and fell right off the ladder. And when director Penelope Spheres asked the punker girl if she felt bad about the man dying, she said, "No, I hate painters." At which point Darby Crash looked right into the camera and rolled his eyes and shook his head, totally exasperated. Classic cinema.
When police searched Dmitry and Natalia's home, they found photographs of a man's decapitated head with olives in the eye sockets and lemons in his nose, being served as a Christmas dinner.
There was also human flesh on a frying pan on the stove, a severed scalp, and in the refrigerator were several mason jars of canned human remains.
There are photographs of this online, and it's pretty disgusting.
Initial reports said there were 19 pieces of human skin, 7 packs of frozen body parts, and a recipe book written by Natalia about preparing meals made from human flesh.
When asked why he had cut the scalp from the victim, Dmitry replied,
"I did a stupid thing."
During interrogation, Natalia told investigators that they had met a 25-year-old waitress named Elena Vakrushiva, who'd come to their home for a prolonged drinking session of vodka, which is a Russian tradition, a way to get through those dark days and freezing nights.
Apparently, at some point, Natalia grew jealous of the much younger and prettier waitress, and they began to quarrel. At which point, Natalia says she ordered her husband to stab the waitress, which he did. And then, as Natalia herself described it, quote,
"He put the body parts in the bathroom, cut the skin off the skull, and severed the ears and lips with his teeth. Then he ate them."
Natalia supposedly confessed to 30 murders, saying they'd meet victims on dating apps, then murder and eat them.
Initial reports also stated she had served the human flesh she canned in mason jars to children at a school where she was working.
But in the end, the couple were only charged with one murder: the undeniable killing of the Elena Varshusheva, whose body parts were in the refrigerator and literally cooking on the stovetop.
Robotics. Earth.
When photographs were leaked and the story went viral, investigators denied Natalia had confessed to 30 murders and claimed the press were exaggerating everything, and most of the claims weren't true, despite the fact that there are undeniable photographs of the crime scene.
Some say there was a political nature to the earlier murders and that they are being covered up by the government. The horrible murder of Elena Vakusheva earned Dmitry the pseudonym The Devil, and he received a 12-year sentence at a maximum security prison, which, I don't know, 12 years seems a little short to me for murder and cannibalism and all that. But Russian prisons are notoriously brutal, and he shortly died there of untreated diabetes in 2020.
Natalia was sentenced to 10 years in a penal colony, followed by another year and a half in prison.
Russian penal colonies are infamously tough. They're basically work camps. You're loaded onto a freight train packed with people and then sent off to a fortress where you live in a barracks with up to 80 other prisoners, sleeping on steel bunks, forbidden to talk to each other.
At 6 a.m, inmates are rounded up and then work all day. They're not allowed to sit, not allowed to read or write a letter. It's just work, work, work until night, and then back to your barracks for sleep on the stacked steel bunks.
Maria Alyokina from the activist Russian punk rock collective Pussy Riot, I love them, just their whole cause, well, because of her political activism and protesting, was sent to penal colony number 14 in the Moradovia region. And she said about it, quote,
"This is not a building with cells. This looks like a strange village, like a gulag labor camp. It actually is a labor camp because by law all the prisoners should work. The quite cynical thing about this work is that prisoners usually sew police uniforms and uniforms for the Russian army. The colony is divided between a factory area where the prisoners make garments and a living zone where 80 women live in one room with just 3 toilets and no hot water."
Natalia Bakshivi is scheduled for release in 2029, if she can survive that long. And while Russian investigators insist it was just a single murder, they've never been able to explain whose head that was, with olives in the eye sockets, being served as a Christmas feast.
Act 3. The sad and disturbing tale of Anatoly Moskvin, the Russian doll maker.
Anatoly Moskvin, the infamous Russian doll maker, was born September 1st, 1966, in the old city of Gorky, in then Soviet Russia.
He was a strange child, solemn and spindly, who preferred books to friends and silence to laughter. He had an incredibly morbid fascination with the dead. As a schoolboy, he'd wander through the frost-covered cemeteries of his city, Krasnaya Etna, where the stone markers leaned like old drunken men, and the wind seemed to whisper the secrets of the dead.
In later years, he would claim his obsession with dead children began with a funeral procession.
On a raw winter's day, amid the clamor of Soviet industry and the icy rush of the Volga River, as young Anatoly aimlessly wandered the cemetery, he came upon a large group of people carrying a small open casket, inside of which lay the body of an 11-year-old girl.
the dark procession flowing like a slow-moving mass of black molasses, a tide of mourners pressing forward beneath the pale, unblinking eye of the winter sun.
Pallbearers led the group, men with faces solemn, pale, and stony as statues, carrying the casket on their shoulders, their boots crunching against the frost-laced ground. Behind them, a priest in heavy vestments murmured prayers, his voice lost in the shuffling rhythm of the procession. Women in headscarves clutched at their rosaries, their lips moving in silent lament, their eyes wet and vacant.
As they lay the casket down and prepared to close it, Anatoly was spotted gawking at them and grabbed by the pallbearers, dragged to the dead child, and ordered to kiss her. As Anatoly himself would later state, an adult pushed my face down to the waxy forehead of the girl in an embroidered cap, and there was nothing I could do but kiss her as ordered.
From that day forward, Anatoly was obsessed with the corpses of children, especially little girls.
Anatoly was a truly gifted student and scholar, eventually attending the Moscow State University, where he immersed himself in the study of language, folklore, and the shadowy history of the Celts, though his main area of interest was burial rituals, death, and the occult.
He spoke 13 languages, read obsessively, and kept a library of over 60,000 books, as well as an extensive collection of dolls. To those who knew him in academic circles, he was brilliant, eccentric, a man of peculiar habits and undeniable intellect. He lived simply with his parents in his childhood home, avoiding liquor, tobacco, and the entanglements of romance. He had no wife, no lover, no children, only his books and his dolls.
After graduating from Moscow State University, Anatoly became a lecturer in Celtic studies at Nizhny Novgorod Linguistic University, also working at the Institute of Foreign Languages, and as a journalist and writer.
Describing himself as a, quote, necropolist, end quote, Moskvin was considered an expert on local cemeteries.
In 2005, Oleg Ryabov, a fellow academic and publisher, commissioned Moskvin to summarize and list the dead in more than 700 cemeteries in 40 regions of Nizhny Novgorod Oblast.
So, for over 2 years, Anatoly traveled on foot, exploring 752 cemeteries, walking nearly 20 miles a day, drinking from puddles and sleeping in haystacks at abandoned farms, or sometimes in the cemeteries themselves, even going as far as spending a night in a coffin, being prepared for a funeral.
Several times during these extensive travels, Anatoly was questioned by police on the suspicion of vandalism and theft, but he was never arrested or detained. After stating his academic credentials and purpose, authorities convinced he was merely an eccentric historian, an innocent academic, lost among the tombs.
The work itself remains unpublished, but has been described as, quote, unique and, quote, priceless by Alexei Yezin, the editor of Necrologies, a weekly paper to which Moskvin was a regular contributor.
Yezin later told the Associated Press that Anatoly was a loner who had, quote-unquote, certain quirks, but who gave no indication that he was up to anything strange or bizarre.
Between 2006 and 2010, Moskvin worked as a freelance correspondent for the newspaper Nizhny Novgorod Worker, publishing articles twice a month. In 2008, Moskvin published an extensive series of articles on the history of Nizhny Novgorod cemeteries that appeared in the paper.
But then everything fell apart for the strange scholar and writer when in 2011, police began investigating a spate of grave desecrations in the area. And on November 2nd, investigators from the Center for Combating Extremism searched his home, discovering 26 corpses of children, which he had dug up, mummified, and turned into dolls.
Police video footage shows the mummified corpses, disguised as dolls, seated on shelves in small rooms amongst books and papers and academic clutter.
And although only 26 bodies, were discovered in his home, he was suspected of desecrating as many as 150 graves, after police found numerous grave accoutrements, such as the metal nameplates that had been removed from headstones.
Police also discovered instructions for making the dolls he'd studiously written out, detailed maps of cemeteries in the region, and a collection of photographs and videos depicting open graves and disinterred bodies, some from as far away as Moscow.
Anatoly immediately confessed and actively cooperated with investigators, saying he'd started making the dolls 10 years earlier. His parents were gone from the house for long periods during the year, and during that time he performed the elaborate taxidermy process, turning children's corpses into dolls.
Anatoly said he felt great sympathy for the dead children and thought they could be brought back to life by either science or black magic.
Crazy, man. Anatoly, being an esteemed expert on Celtic culture, said that the ancient Druids slept on graves in order to communicate with spirits of the dead, as did peoples of Siberia, in particular the ancient Yakuts. And that is what led him to want to be near the graves of children.
He said that he would search the obituaries for recently deceased children to dig up. And we have to point out that Ed Gein did the same thing, but instead of looking for children to dig up and use for dolls, he searched for elderly women that reminded him of his mother, using the parts for a variety of bizarre projects and eventually creating a suit of human flesh he could wear.
It's the very definition of a ghoul, grave robbing for pleasure. Well, when Anatoly found an obituary that, quote-unquote, spoke to him, he would sleep on the child's grave in order to determine if the spirit within wished to be brought back to life.
Anatoly said he first started sleeping on graves, trying to communicate with dead children nearly 20 years earlier, and insisted that when he began, he never dug up a grave without the permission of the child within.
But as he grew older, it became physically painful for him to sleep outdoors on the graves, the Russian earth so cold and hard. So he began bringing the bodies home with him, where it would be more comfortable to sleep near them, hoping that their spirits will be more willing to speak in a safe, welcoming place, and that they might be easier to hear since they were now no longer underground.
During the vast studies on death and the various preparations of the dead, he'd done a tremendous amount of research on mummification and became an expert in the practice.
He dehydrated the bodies using a combination of salt and baking soda, and then found cool, dry places around the cemeteries to let them sit and mummify in. Once the corpses were fully dried out and didn't smell anymore, he'd carry them home, where he'd try to make the bodies as functional as possible, so that when he discovered a way to bring the spirits back, they'd have nice, comfortable bodies to live in. Which makes total sense if you think about it. Check this out. Imagine waking up and you're a spirit stuck in your own mummified corpse that had been turned into a doll, sitting on the shelf of this mad scholar of the occult.
Pretty wild. Pretty wild. It's got like, did you see Longlegs?
Yes. Yes,
It's like
yeah, that is like that. Oh my gosh, yes.
it's like Longlegs a little bit. I mean, I thought Longlegs was very cool and atmospheric, but the ending kind of got a bit bogged down by trying to tie up everything in a nice, neat bow. And also this whole story, just like vibes wise, not like actual facts or anything, but have you ever seen Incident in a Ghostland?
Yes. Yeah. That's the
Kind
same
of
guy who
like,
made Martyrs, which is one of my
yeah,
favorite
which
movies of all time.
same. Have we not talked about this before? Martyrs
think
is one of
so.
my favorite movies of all time, which is why I watched Incident in a Ghostland. And it's not nearly as good, but
I
it's
love
pretty
that H.P.
wild.
Lovecraft was in it. They did such a cool job with it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. But yeah, that whole sort of like doll,
Right,
like
the doll thing.
horror vibe.
Or
And it's not just doll horror. It's kind of like there's kind of an element to like the dolls being representative of like kind of being stuck. Where is your spirit really? Like which
Yeah.
reality is the correct one?
Tourist
Yeah.
Trap from the, I think it's late 70s, early 80s. You ever see that?
No.
Oh my God, it's so creepy and weird, dude. It's a bizarre movie. And there's like all these animatronic dolls and it's great.
gotta check it
I heard
out.
they're actually remaking it right now.
Oh, sick.
But you should definitely check out the original one, Tourist Trap. Very
All right,
bizarre.
cool. I'm on it. So, the process of making them into dolls involved wrapping the limbs in strips of cloth, stuffing the body cavity with rags, and adding nice, happy wax masks decorated with nail polish over their faces. He'd then dress them in colorful children's clothing and put a wig on them.
That's not spooky at all.
It's just so funny too to me because I mean I've, as you know, a 4-year-old daughter who's like super into spooky stuff, and she listens to a Peacock Kids podcast called Spine Chilling Stories, and it's for kids. And one of her favorite stories of like all the stories and the multiple seasons is The Curse of the Doll Maker. So there's something that even like little kids can kind of sink their teeth into with like just the whole concept. I mean, we could do a whole episode on like Uncanny Valley, creepy dolls, doll horror lore. I mean, it's just wild. This is like a true crime story that fits into that whole sort of.
I got a little collection of creepy dolls. It's just
Yeah.
people are like, they're always like, you like creepy stuff. You want this creepy doll? I'm gonna throw it away. And I'm like, yeah, dude, give it to me, man. I ended up with like a whole bunch of them. They look good
Oh,
next to
that's wild.
skulls because I also collect animal skulls. So
Oh yeah, like the one that you gave me that you can literally
Yeah.
see in the video behind me right now
Oh, yeah, yeah,
in
let's
my
check it out.
bookcase.
nice.
Ah, gotta love it. Spooky dolls, man.
Yeah, that's the combination right there, the skull and the spooky doll. Yeah, that was a Monster High doll I found in my backyard, all naked and sprawled out with its head backwards and shit.
I was never even really a doll person growing up, but like, yeah, the spooky dolls are just so much more. It's almost like they're embracing, because dolls are spooky and creepy and have that sort of uncanny valley thing going on. And it's almost like to just make them straight up creepy and make, the Frankenstein one have like a mechanical leg and, all the creepy crap they've got on them. It's sort of just like embracing their inherent nature.
Yes, yeah. I've always been a fan of Monster High dolls.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
funny.
My daughter's like, she's not into it anymore because she's now older, but she had them. Now their dogs have them.
Oh, that's funny.
That's how I find them. That's how I get
Yeah,
them.
I have a feeling that when she someday grows up and isn't into them anymore, they will probably end up living in my office where they will be right at home.
Just
my
spray
home
paint them
office.
black and glue them to skulls. I do.
It's like the Murder Coaster co-host emblem there. You gotta have one of those in your office. Oh, so poor Anatoly. Anatoly told investigators that, yes, he was aware that he was committing a crime, but felt the dead children were, quote, calling out to be rescued, and believed that rescuing the children was more important than obeying the law.
Aw, he was rescuing the children. The catcher in the rye. The catcher in the cemetery. He also claimed to be motivated by his own desire to have children. specifically a daughter, saying he regretted that he never had children and at one point attempted to adopt a young girl against the wishes of his parents.
The application was rejected because of his low income.
What did he do again? Oh yeah, he was a writer.
Anatoly denied any sexual attraction to the dolls and said he considered them to be his children. He'd sing songs to them, watch cartoons with them, even held birthday parties for them, and gave them Christmas presents.
Which is more than we can say about old Ed Gein, whose ghoulism took on a most disturbing sexual nature.
Anatoly was charged under Article 244 of the Russian Criminal Code for the desecration of graves and dead bodies, a charge which carried up to 5 years in prison. But after a psychiatric evaluation, it was determined that he had a form of paranoid schizophrenia, and on May 25, 2012, the Leninsky District Court of... That's a fucking mouthful. Let me try that again.
You can just say Leninsky District Court and leave that second part out if you want. Unless you're feeling it.
I can say it. I got it. The Leninsky District Court of Nizhny Novgorod deemed Moskvin unfit to stand trial, releasing him from criminal liability. He was instead sentenced to, quote, coercive medical measures and moved to a psychiatric clinic.
Well, no, when the Russians say coercive medical measures, it fucking sounds scary to me, but...
Yeah.
In September 2018, Anatoly Moskvin's doctors stated that he was no longer dangerous and petitioned the court to release him for outpatient care from home. But a subsequent psychiatric evaluation found that it was too early to release Moskvin, and the hospital withdrew their petition.
And so today, the Russian doll maker sits in a mental institution, dreaming of his brood of dead little girls.
Act 4. Pearls Before Swine.
Krasnoyarsky is a vast and rugged region in Siberia, defined by its harsh climate, industrial power, and untamed wilderness. It is home to the mighty Yenisei River, dense taiga forests.
For centuries, this land has been both a refuge and a place of exile. The indigenous Evenki and Ket peoples once roamed its forest, living in harmony with a landscape both beautiful and unforgiving. But as Russia expanded eastward, Krasnoyarsk became a crucial outpost, first for the fur trade, then for the empire itself. The Cossacks arrived in the 17th century, building wooden forts along the river, carving settlements out of the wilderness.
By the 19th century, it was a destination for those whom the Tsar deemed dangerous. Intellectuals, revolutionaries, criminals. They were sent there in shackles, forced to endure the brutal winters, their lives swallowed by the cold and the silence. And yet, even in exile, they left their mark, building roads, crafting villages, shaping the region into thriving farming communities, like the one where 17-year-old farmer's daughter Milena Shrevlova lived.
Milena Shrevlova was as beautiful as she was hardworking. With lush blonde hair and striking green eyes, she looked more like a European fashion model than a Siberian farm girl.
In the summer of 2024, just last year, though the story sounds like something from a fairy tale, her parents went to town and left her at home to care for the animals, including a very aggressive female hog that they warned her to beware of, as it had been attacking the farm workers.
Aggressive hogs are no joke. They can get up to 300 pounds and can be mean as hell. And researching this case, I found out that just a week ago on a farm in Alabama, one person was killed and another severely injured by an aggressive hog.
And a Slate magazine article from 2017 about a 70-year-old Vietnam veteran that was killed and eaten by his hogs, leaving nothing but his dentures and bones, states that in the United States, 22 people a year are killed by livestock. And in 75% of those cases, the animals were purposely attacking the people.
Well, Melena's parents called her on her phone to see how the farm work was going, and when she didn't answer or respond to their texts, they grew worried and asked a friend to check on her. And when they did, they found the beautiful girl in the pig pen, torn apart.
It appeared Melena's parents' worst fears had become reality.
Paramedics were called, but she was gone, and there was nothing they could do to save her. Initial investigation reports said, quote,
"The animals tore her femoral artery and bit her. Milena died from blood loss from multiple wounds to her head and body caused by pig bites."
but the prosecutor of Krasnoyarsk Uzhersky district immediately went to the scene and thought it seemed suspicious, and he ordered a forensic study which uncovered head wounds that did not seem to be caused by animal bites. Police began to investigate, questioning the neighbors, and soon one Igor Zaika, a neighboring farmhand, confessed to murdering the beautiful farm girl.
The 40-year-old Igor, did you say, or Igor?
I said Igor. Let's call him Igor. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, isn't it Igor?
He's good.
Okay, so, but we're going Igor?
I like Igor. I don't know.
The 40-year-old Igor had worked for Melena's father and harbored a grudge after having been let go. So he went to the farm, thinking no one was there, to kill some of the livestock as revenge.
Yeah, that's some old school grudge settling there. Secretly killing someone's livestock.
Then beautiful Milena came walking out of the farmhouse door, surprising him, as Igor himself would say in this videotaped confession.
I saw his daughter leaving, so I hit her twice. I hit her the first time, she pushed me away. I hit her the second time, she fell over. I then threw her in the pig pen to be eaten.
The victim's devastated boyfriend, Vladimir Bedny, 18, posted on social media, quote, "You will forever remain in my heart."
Oh, that's so sad. This story is really like a modern day fairy tale in a way, isn't it? With a crazy twist.
Yeah, it's pretty, shitty.
Yeah. It's wild that they thought it was the pigs and it was Igor.
Yeah, tried to cover himself.
Using pigs to cover his tracks.
He did use the pigs to cover his tracks. Shitty. Act 5, Baba Yaga, the Granny Ripper.
Is it Yaga?
I think it's
Yaga.
like literally 50-50. It can go either way, and I've been sort of pushed in the direction by multiple people in the horror genre that say Baba Yaga.
Okay, perfect.
I mean, you can say Yaga because I
want
swear
to say it the way
people-
the people in the horror community say it.
I mean, I don't know if it's
right.
like people, but I know like there was like an antho of like women in horror that wrote a Baba Yaga. And Tatiana, there's a girl, it's actually a really cool book. I feel like you might like it. Her name is Tatiana. She writes, it's like a 2-book series and it's called Ask Baba Yaga, Otherworldly Advice for Everyday Troubles. And it's just such a cool book. It's like she pens questions and then she answers it as if she's Baba Yaga. And the Baba Yaga is like answering a self-help thing and like she gets asked a
Ask
question
Baba
and she's
Yaga.
like, a foul wind follows the cravings of minds after the flood. Like it's crazy how, like, the girl, I've listened to interviews with her on a podcast, and she said, like, she really felt like she's Russian and she had like a huge connection to her growing up. Like, it was always her favorite fairy tale involved her. And she said that, like, she truly felt like she was like possessed. Like, when she wrote the answers to the book, she felt like she was like a different fucking person. Like, she could just get in this zone and write these responses that didn't sound anything like her normal narrative voice. It's really cool.
That's awesome.
Anyway, so yeah, I don't know. I listened to her interview and like they were all saying Baba Yaga, and it sort of like swayed me in my own brain.
Yeah, well, she's Russian. She knows. And so Baba Yaga. And in the dark forest of Slavic folklore, among the towering pines and whispering birches, there is the name spoken in hushed tones. A name that has stirred the imaginations of children and haunted their dreams for generations. Baba Yaga.
She is at once an enigma and a terror, a woman of power who does not abide by the rules of men. An immense and hideously ugly hag, she lives in a house perched upon great striding chicken legs, a hut that turns at her command.
Some say she is an ancient witch, an ogress with an insatiable hunger. Others say she is a guardian, a trickster, an old woman who knows more than she lets on.
In 1755, the name Baba Yaga first appeared in print, tucked away in a Russian grammar book. But scholars agree that her story is much older. Passed from mother to child, village to village, she has walked through the oral traditions of Eastern Europe for centuries. A creature of both menace and wisdom, a witch who may devour a lost child or guide a hero toward their destiny.
To some, she is a relic of ancient Slavic spirituality, a being that predates Christianity, kin to Persephone, a goddess of death and rebirth, of the great cycle of destruction and renewal.
To others, she is something more sinister, an incarnation of fear itself, born from the dark corners of the human imagination.
But to the people who have spoken her name over the centuries, she remains a woman who exists outside the expectations of society, independent, unyielding, and always, always watching.
In Old Russian, the word baba could refer to a midwife, a sorceress, or fortune teller, and the standard modern Russian word for grandmother, babushka, is derived from it. Yet the origin and meaning of Yaga is far more obscure and has inspired several different interpretations among linguists.
Among the many possibilities, Yaga could mean disease, illness, horror, chill, wicked wood nymph, witch, evil woman, rage, fury, anger, torture, pain, and worry, serpent, snake, uncle's wife, stepmother, aunt, and mother.
Scholar Brian Cooper claims that, quote, the name suggests a personification of suffocating oppression.
Suffocating oppression. Man, that's heavy. And in the end, the name is generally understood to mean grandmother witch, even if that is not a direct translation.
But in the world of true crime, there is an actual Baba Yaga, the Granny Ripper, Tamara Samsonova, a cannibal believed to be responsible for over a dozen murders and grisly mutilations.
On a summer night in July 2015, security footage from an apartment complex in St. Petersburg captured an unsettling scene. A frail, elderly woman dragging a heavy black bag through shadowy corridors.
Inside the bag was the dismembered body of 79-year-old Valentina Nikoleva Elenova, her head and limbs severed with a hacksaw.
And just days later, police arrested 68-year-old Tamara Samsonova, who was Valentina's caretaker.
Tamara admitted to sedating Valentina with sleeping pills before hacking her to pieces while she was still alive, then boiling parts of the corpse on her stove before disposing of the remains near a pond behind her home.
She described using a hacksaw to sever Valentina's head and hands before boiling them on the stove, saying, quote,
I came home and put the whole pack of Fenazepam, 50 pills, into her Olivier salad. I woke up at 2 a.m. and she was lying on the floor, so I started cutting her into pieces.
As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a trail of carnage spanning 2 decades, including grisly confessions written in blood-stained diaries, bodies carved apart with surgical precision, and whispers of cannibalism, earning her the monikers the Granny Butcher, as well as Baba Yaga.
Tamara Samsonova, the Granny Ripper, was born on April 25, 1947, in the city of Uzhar, now part of the Krasnoyarsk Krai.
After graduating from high school, Tamara moved to Moscow, attending the Moscow State Linguistic University. And after graduating, she moved to St. Petersburg, where she married Alexei Samsonova.
She worked as a travel agent for a while, as well as in a Hotel Europa, and in 2000, her husband disappeared. There was a police investigation, but searches yielded nothing.
In 2003, a man's dismembered corpse had been found in the exact location that Valentina's body had been discovered. But investigators at the time had been unable to identify the man, and the case had gone cold. But police, now reading her blood-soaked journals, realized that he had been a lodger, staying in Tamara's apartment. As she wrote, quote,
I killed my tenant Volodya, cut him into pieces in the bathroom with a knife, put the pieces of his body in a plastic bag, and then threw them away.
The blood-soaked journals, written in Russian, English, and German, were filled with mundane notes, interwoven with matter-of-fact accounts of butchery.
Authorities found blood splatter throughout her home, along with a kitchen knife still marked with human remains.
Neighbors whispered about the woman they called Granny Ripper. Some claim she had spent months in a psychiatric hospital. When interrogated, she made erratic claims, first calling herself an actress, then a graduate of the prestigious Vaganova Academy of Russian Ballet, before finally admitting that she was just a hotel attendant and travel agent.
With each confession, the body count grew. Samsonova admitted to at least 13 murders, and authorities feared the number could be far higher. They reopened the case of her husband, now suspecting that she had killed him as well.
During her first court appearance, she gave a bizarre performance. She blew kisses to the reporters, confessed to the killings, then abruptly changed the story, blaming her neighbors for the murders instead. And looking directly at the judge, she smiled and said,
I have been preparing for this trial for 10 years. It's all deliberate.
At times, she appeared lost in confusion, her expression shifting between amusement and indifference.
Then the case took an even darker turn. Investigators suspected that Samsonova had not only killed her victims, but consumed them. Reports suggested she had a grotesque fascination with removing her victims' lungs, allegedly eating them. Days later, authorities announced they believed she had murdered as many as 21 people.
Eating lung sounds gross. Have you ever eaten a lung?
No, it sounds totally gross. I completely agree.
I've heard about people doing it. I don't know. I mean, I don't mean on humans, of animals and stuff.
Right.
Declared mentally unfit to stand trial, Tamara Samsonova was committed to a psychiatric hospital indefinitely.
Now 78 years old, the real-life Baba Yaga is a shadowy figure, locked away from the world, living in a cell and not a hut perched on chicken's legs. Her true body count forever a mystery.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. 5 bizarre acts of Russian crime, mayhem, and madness.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
And I want to give a big shout out to Radio Uki for letting us use their songs Raspberry Universe, Spiral, and Rush. Thank you so much, Radio Uki. There's links to them in the show notes. And do you have a band that you would like us to play? Let us know. Do you have a case you'd like us to cover? Let us know. Did we get something wrong? You just want to say hi. Reach out to us at murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. That's murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. And now we're going to let Radio Uki's Spiral play out for you.
Bye-bye.
Pewni go,